Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is a podcast for all seasons. I am Josh Mundy, and today we're going to do season 3, episode 10. We're going to be talking about the second season of Supergirl now that it's moved over to the CW. Talk about how it's affected the show, what's changed, what's new, what's better, what's worse. With us, as always, is my co-host Eric Joseph, but we also have a super special guest from the Culture Junkies, Mr. Kenshiro. Our buddy Keenan, and he is going to be chiming in on Supergirl as well. We're also going to try and talk some shop about comics. So, Eric, why don't you go ahead and get us started and throw it over to Ken when you want his opinions, his excellent opinions, which is the reason we brought him over.
All right. Hi, Josh. Hi to all of our listeners. Those familiar with us and those first timers coming over, maybe some of you who follow Culture Junkies and are just sampling our wares for the first time. As Josh said, we're going to be talking a bit of Supergirl today, throwing in some comics toward the end. Got about 3 hours of sleep. We had a good time yesterday. Well, mostly Kenshiro and I. Josh didn't get to show up, but we had a little bit of a Culture Junkies party yesterday. It was fight night. No, we were not bare knuckle boxing at an undisclosed location. We were playing, the theme was fighting games, beat 'em ups, stuff like that. It was a really good time. So look forward to partying with those guys again. Pretty soon we did some live streaming toward the end of the night. Those of you who have heard some of our episodes in the past may recognize this gentleman because he's been on the show once before. So before we proceed further, please welcome back Kenshiro.
What's going on, peoples? Glad to have you here. I'm very humbled by the platitudes my two compatriots have given me. Looking forward to dropping some knowledge and having a really good time. Still trying to recover from the effects of last night. We kind of burned the midnight oil. I'll say that. Isn't that right, Eric?
Yeah, but we did not listen to the band Midnight Oil. I guess we'll point that out.
You guys are so ridiculous.
All right, we kind of didn't do all that.
I figured you guys are gonna get to rock until 2 a.m. But gaming night. Good old land.
Your estimate is off by almost an hour. Well, yeah, I didn't go to sleep till like 3, basically.
Oof.
So, but
that's
yeah,
brutal. That's stuff for young men. So Supergirl. Now, I had not seen the entirety of Supergirl season 1. I had caught maybe, I want to say, about 15 or 16 episodes. I had missed a few in the middle, and I didn't know what to expect when they moved over to the CW. I didn't know if the CW effect was going to take over and it was going to become a little bit more formulaic. We talk occasionally about how, Marvel movies seem to have a similar formula, a similar genre. I guess the little beats and tropes that they hit on fairly regularly. And I would say that the DC's WB shows kind of have a similar. Now, granted, we only have 3 to work with, but now we've got a 4th on the CW, and it seems like they kind of hit on similar tropes. And I guess maybe it's just a effect of the genre itself. But how have you guys been liking the first 2 episodes of Supergirl? Because I've actually very, very much enjoyed Supergirl as I've watched more. I've been kind of going over the first season in Netflix, and I like its. I'm a big fan of Superman, as everyone knows on this show, as is Kenshiro as well. And we have got the first introduction of Superman in live action on a television show since the end of Smallville, which, I mean, technically we did see our boy Tom Welling wearing the duds, if only for a single episode or a single scene. What do you guys think about Tyler Hoechlin, or Hoechlin, or however you want to pronounce that crazy last name as well? Give us your thoughts. I'll start with you, Kenshiro. What do you think?
All right. Well, I'll say this. one of the biggest gripes I think a lot of people had with Supergirl last year was that it was, you know, inherently overly cheesy. And you know, you heard so many times that they said, okay, well, you mentioned Superman, but you're not going to show Superman. We always thought that it was, you know, because he was tied up in the Warner Brothers movies, the DC movies, you could say, and they didn't want to have like any kind of controversy going on with, you know, having a Superman that was more representative of what Superman was supposed to be than what we got in Man of Steel or Batman versus Superman, Batman v Superman, excuse me. And they couldn't go any further, and they go ahead and they cast Tyler Hoechlin as Superman. And you know, a lot of people kind of were griping a little bit about his costume, and you know, deservedly so, because the costume is kind of I guess is the best way I can put it. But you can't help but notice that Tyler Hoechlin's performances as Superman and as his alter ego Clark Kent were absolutely spot on. He might be the best representation of Superman I've seen in totality, as far as like getting the duality of the role, the Clark Kent, the Superman, the gravitas of it. He's doing it better than Henry Cavill's done it. He's doing it better than Dean Cain did it. You could almost say he's doing it better than Christopher Reeve is doing it, only because he's bringing it more into modern times, where, you know, they're not, where Reeve was playing like the representative Silver Age Superman, you know, the Clark Kent that wasn't suave or anything like that, but, you know, was kind of bumbling and, you know, kind of trying to play this this goofball when he's not wearing the Superman threads. But Hoechlin did a damn good job of being both Clark Kent and Superman. You know, especially the Superman when compared to Batman v Superman, where, you know, he's all brooding and dour and doubting himself and stuff like that. No. He's smiling, he's saving people, you know, he's cracking wise with dudes that are saying, you know, hey, enjoyed the one line that he had in the second either the first or second episode. Yeah, it was the second episode. He said, or one of the criminals was like shooting bullets at him. They were bouncing off. So what does he do? He calls off and he tries to, you know, give him a right cross across the jaw. And he's just like, why the punching? I've never understood that. I thought that was really funny, and it gave the charm of Superman, you know. And even when he saved that family in the first episode, and the family, you know, he saved them, turned around, gave him a wink, and flew off or whatever. I just thought that he was phenomenal in the role. I don't want to take up too much time, so, you know, go ahead. I thought he was really good.
Eric, what'd you think? And I'll give my opinion after that.
I agree a lot with what he said. As far as I've heard Tyler Hoechlin, I've heard Tyler Hoechlin. I guess we'll just call him Tyler H, maybe, till we hear him say his own name out loud. But I really did like him as Superman. I think, I don't know if I'm ready to pick who I like better between he and Henry Cavill, because it's almost apples and oranges. I think really he is more of that positive, bubbly Superman and what we expect from the comics. I think his Clark Kent, it's almost reminiscent of Dean Cain. It's not the overly nerdy type that Christopher Reeve played. It's more like the everyman Clark Kent, but he did have that very positive charm to him. It's, you know, walking up to people, shaking hands, hey, nice job. And what was another moment when people react to him and they're like, it's him, as opposed to in the movies where it's like, oh no, it's Superman, he's here to kill us. No. That really, that's more so not the actor, that's the way the writing is and how they portray him. And I understood why they wanted to do it in Batman versus Superman as like a real world reaction to the character, because I mean it's almost reminiscent of how things went down in the Earth One graphic novels. But at the end of the day, you know, WB learned, and they said this as they've made their course correction with Justice League shooting. They learned that's not how people want to see their superheroes. So that's influenced the tone of future DC movies. Maybe not necessarily Batman solo movies, because you have to keep those dark. But team ups like this, I understand. It's also, we get to see Superman do something we don't get much in live action, aside from maybe a construct of Jor-El, is interact with actual family. And I mean, granted, we had a version of the character on Smallville, but if you want to get technical, this is the first live action team up of Superman and Supergirl in live action. We're talking adopting these identities and in costumes. So, and their dynamic was different than Tom Welling and Laura Vandervoorts. So it was it was very refreshing, but I really like it's left a much more positive impression on me, just even these first two episodes on the CW, because season one overall, I would say, was good. It started off, a little trying to find its footing. Then it had some very good episodes embracing the mythology. And then you had a really weak season finale. But I think the CW is a place where a show like this can thrive more so, and maybe the CBS wasn't the right home for it. And I kind of wonder if there were things the network wanted over at CBS, like they've pretty much already abandoned the Kara Jimmy Olsen romance, because they kind of felt like it was something they were more forced into, and now they've kind of gotten away from it. And I can kind of understand why, but let's not have it where it's going to be another season of them building up to a romance again, because I can certainly see TV writers doing that. If you want to introduce romantic interests, give them some new romantic interests. But I think there's this really defined CW effect, and though technically Supergirl's not part of the Arrowverse, it's part of the Arrow multiverse now. As we know, Kara will be going over to Flash, Arrow, Legends of Tomorrow. She'll be crossing dimensional barriers thanks to Cisco and his abilities. So hopefully they do some Crisis on Infinite Earths at some point, meld it so she doesn't have to cross a breach every time they do a team up. But it's moving the show up to Vancouver from LA, I think, allows them to do a lot more things in-house instead of having to do phone calls back and forth. And I don't know, there's just, maybe you guys will agree, there's just this different feeling already in the first two episodes. And I think they're really more so, instead of keeping this genre almost, I don't want to say at arm's length, it's really, I think it's truly at home. And I don't want to keep sounding redundant or talking at circles, but I think you guys and listeners know what I'm getting at. And granted, Superman was only on for 2 episodes, and hopefully they're able to get him back, because there's always been that red tape between film and TV divisions. But now we see Superman, and we had Deadshot on Arrow this week. Even if only as a hallucination, that's still progress, because we were all pretty much sure they had to kill off Deadshot, though we never saw a body, and Amanda Waller because of the Suicide Squad movie. But hopefully, even hallucination Deadshot said, hey, you never saw my body. So hopefully we do get to see Michael Rowe again one day. And I don't think Amanda Waller's sitting up from that gunshot to the head anytime soon. But, they never killed off Katana. So hopefully we see her again in the Arrowverse. But it's just, I really think that pretty soon we're going to be talking about Supergirl in the same way we talk about the Flash, because I think we're just going to get more characters from the comic books, and I think just week after week it's going to be a real spectacle. And right now, Supergirl is the highest rated show on the CW for superhero shows, because unfortunately ratings for the Flash, Arrow, and Legends are down. Might be a little too early to say that maybe the CW and superhero TV's bubble is starting to burst, but just keep in mind we've also got, football, MLB playoffs are in full swing. World Series is coming up. We've got the presidential debates. There are many factors, so it's too early to totally say why ratings are down, but it's still a good time to be a geek because I don't think any of these shows are getting canceled anytime soon. So at the risk of, getting too off topic and being analytical about the genre as a whole, we're going to bring up a few points in a bit. I think people might agree with me. Lena Luthor's really hot. I think she's a great addition to the show. But I've been rambling a bit. So before I talk about any other points, Josh, you chime in. Let us know what you think about these first two episodes. What you thought of Tyler's Superman, and just what impression season 2 leading on you?
Yeah, exactly. So the Tyler Hoechlin effect. I think that he's very reminiscent.
Let me break in a sec. It is. I looked it up. It's Hecklin. Tyler Hecklin.
Hecklin. My man Ken with the backup. Thank you, buddy. All right, so Tyler Hecklin. I actually agree with a lot of what Kenshiro said in terms of some of the portrayal and whatnot, and I agree with a lot of what you said as well, Eric. Specifically with regards to his portrayal of the duality of Clark Kent and Superman. Now, granted, we only saw him as Clark Kent in a very minor role, and he does appear to be playing a little bit more to that Dean Cain everyman Superman. I'd say it's, I spoke with Dean Cain about this actually when we saw him at Motor City Comic Con, and I said that, at one point in time he was my favorite iteration of Superman. I watched it growing up as a kid, and it was very close to the comics in a lot of regards. And one of the things that I never liked about the Chris Reeves Clark Kent specifically was, the idea of bumbling and hiding with your, clumsiness and so on and so forth. No one could ever believe that this goofy idiot is Superman. It is a valid idea. I think that both Dean Cain and even Henry Cavill had said it, is that Superman would not want to be bringing attention to himself as Clark Kent. The more that he's bringing attention to himself as this bumbling oaf of a person, he's just bringing attention to himself, period. And we all know that bumblingness is what gave him away in Superman 2, at least the Lester cut, when he dives into the fire and then Lois realizes he did not indeed burn his hand in the fire. No, he is Superman. So I kind of like the everyman thing. It's a little bit more reminiscent to Clark Kent in the comics. This is a cool, collected professional. This is a guy who's at the absolute top of his game as far as a reporter is concerned. He is, I believe that they've talked about how he's Pulitzer Prize winning in this show, in Supergirl, but they've also done that in the comics. So, no one's going to believe this guy as a hard-hitting, gritty, get his hands dirty, investigative journalist if he's a bumbling moron. It just doesn't make narrative sense. And so I like the idea that they played him as an everyman. But I also like the fact that they made him as a, Midwestern values, gee golly gosh. They talk about some of his phrases, and you can hear him talking over the phone with Perry White, and Perry White's like, what is that? What does lickety split mean, kind of thing? And it's a joke. And then he makes the joke about Perry White. Well, you say Great Caesar's ghost, and he's like, oh, okay, I know this isn't about you. And then, there's some very, very humorous banter as far as the back and forth. I like the fact that Cat Grant found him sexually attractive. I thought that was something that we don't typically see from Clark Kent. And it's like, okay, yeah, come on, Henry Cavill. My wife thinks he's one of the more attractive guys on the planet. I know there are plenty of women who think the same. Look at the guy, for God's sakes. And Tyler Hecklin is,
real careful. Careful.
Tyler Hecklin as well. These are guys that women are saying are very good looking guys. I'm sure there are plenty of guys who are saying they're good looking guys, not me. But So yeah, the idea that these guys are walking
Even though you
around
just did, though. You just did, but whatever.
I just got in with it. But the fact that you have these guys walking around, and yeah, women aren't going to be like, oh, hey, this Clark Kent, not only is he the baddest ass reporter on the planet, but he's also a really good looking guy. I think it's funny that they actually touched on that, and it took a show that puts a concentration on women or a little bit more than others to actually point out something that's been deadly obvious to most women who have seen Clark Kent. But his Superman portrayal was what really was spot on. I mean, he gave this just overwhelming sense of I'll get to that in a minute. I'll say the only way that he lacked. I'll say that, and then I'll shower with him with praise. But the only way that I thought he lacked was I felt like he didn't come across with the complete type of command of a Superman who had been in business for a long period of time. And we get the idea that he's been Superman since Kara has been a little girl. We see the Superman opening up her ship in the very first episode of Supergirl. So the fact is that he didn't seem to have a little bit more command. The only time that we really saw him break that was when the Martian Manhunter, John Jones, kind of gets in his face, and he kind of just says, what are you going to do about it, to this guy that he knows is, the Martian Manhunter is super powerful, one of the more powerful heroes in the DC universe. And I was like, yeah, that's what Superman would say. Like, because what are you going to do about it to me? I mean, that's exactly what he'd say when Batman gets in his face or Aquaman gets in his face. It's like, I'm Superman, dude. It's like, bring it on. But other than that, I felt like he didn't have the strongest of command of the character, like where if you're a criminal, you would fear Superman. Maybe that's me getting too much into the gritty realism that we've seen from the Man of Steel and Batman vs. Superman movies. But I did think that the line that you mentioned was just hilarious. And, the guy shoots him 6 times, and then he's like, really, why the punching? Like, the gun didn't work. What did you think was going to happen? Like, you think the pistol's going to get it done? And I thought that some of the little nods, like you mentioned, the wink to the family, and then the way that people just light up when Superman shows up. Her sister Alex says, "Oh, he smells so good," and then with Cat Grant, being attracted to not Superman but to Clark Kent, is that there's something about Superman Clark Kent. He's more human than human. He's superhuman in terms of, he's not just super in terms of his powers, but it's almost like he has an energetic, magnetic effect to people. And then obviously that plays to his villains, not liking him. It's the quite opposite effect, because he's so superhuman. They hate him for it. And we talked some stuff about Lex Luthor, but I do feel like I'm rambling now. But Tyler Hoechlin, I thought he did a great job. I don't know that I want to put him in the pantheon of best Superman ever. I know people give Lois and Clark a real hard time because it was a very 90s product, and it had some very corny, tropey stuff. But as far as their portrayal of Superman and their portrayal of Clark Kent, I still think it's maybe the most comic book accurate that we'd ever seen. This would probably right now be a close second with what we've seen so far. It might tie it. So if Dean Cain manages to listen to this, yes, I know that I had told you at one point you were my favorite Superman, and that's still technically true. Tyler Hoechlin's doing a good job to knock you down off the rung. But the fact that Dean Cain might come back in the show, I mean, there's just so many things. I love the fact that these DC shows, play up the mythos, and they play up the, we have the actress who played Supergirl in the movie. We have Dean Cain from Lois and Clark, and we've got these people. Jay Garrick is being played by the guy who played the Flash, and we've got actors from all of the. We've got Mark Hamill in the Flash and things like that. I love the fact that DC plays up their own internal mythos. They have a long career, and I hope that it continues forward. I know we're supposed to see Linda Carter as the president in an upcoming episode, who played Wonder Woman in the 70s show. So any other thoughts on Supergirl as far as other than our thoughts on Tyler Hoechlin, guys?
I'll give my 2 cents real quick. Just generally off the season, pretty much what Eric was saying about the dissolution of the Kara and Jimmy relationship. That happened so fast. I mean, it was just like, oh, we're gonna build this up all the first season, and then we're just gonna pretty much walk it back in the very first episode of the next season after we finally paid it all off through a whole will they, won't they, let's bring in Lucy Lane and run her through the mud and have Jimmy kind of treat her like crap, and then yeah, that was weird, but I'm a little bit also as far as for the future goes with Supergirl, as far as like seeing Jimmy Olsen become Guardian, and I'm on the fence on that. I'm not sure about that. I'm glad to see Wynn is over the DEO now, because I thought, his talents obviously were wasted being the IT monkey for Cat Grant. And I'll say this about Coach Flockhart. Last season, I hated her as Cat Grant. I mean, just the way she portrayed her as Cat Grant. Just I don't know if it wasn't what I saw Cat Grant as being. I mean, yeah, she was never this media mogul, gossip hound, or whatever, and just came across as one of those. I don't want to say she came across like a Kardashian, but I almost don't know any other way to really put it.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty accurate assessment. I mean,
okay. All right. Then, okay, she came across as a Kardashian, and I can't stand the Kardashians, but I could always see that there was a little bit something more underneath. And the first 2 episodes, she paid that off in spades. I don't know if it's because she's going to have very limited time being on the show, but we will see what's going to happen as far as that goes.
So what were our overall thoughts from both of you guys? What were you guys' overall thoughts on the first 2 episodes, just in terms of moving forward? Eric had mentioned he thinks it's an improvement. What do you think, Ken?
I do think it's an improvement from the standpoint of both not only story wise, but just the pacing. It seems like it's found itself. I think, of course, with most shows, like, they can't all be like a Flash, which in the first season hit the ground running, pun totally intended. But Supergirl kind of, needed some time to find its wings, and I think, these first 2 episodes kind of show that it has. Because what I liked the most about it is that, even though Superman was part of the show, Kara never got overshadowed. She was still very much part of the show, and she still really was the focal point. I mean, I know a lot of people are going to be like, "Oh, more Superman," but no, Kara still shined through in the show, and I really like that a lot. Because I mean, what's her name playing?
Melissa Benoist.
Lisa Benoist, I think that's what they call it. But anyway, she's really cute, and I like her playing Supergirl. So, and yes, Eric is absolutely right. Lena Luthor is pretty hot. I'm not mad that she's part of the show. Brenda Strong, what was the Brawless Wonder or something like that. I think Atlanta called her in Seinfeld. Yes, she's pretty nice to look at too, even though she's a bit older. So, not to be completely sexist or anything, but there's plenty of things to look forward to in Supergirl. With Mon-El getting ready to wake up next episode. I think that was Maxima I saw coming. Miss Martian is coming. It's gonna be some really, really cool stuff. So I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, that's right. Starting soon, we all will have a case of Mon-El nucleosis.
Ooh.
But yeah, I don't think I really touched on it much because it's Superman, so we're all going to have a tendency to talk about Superman. But yeah, it didn't lose the fact that it is Kara's show, and I think they deliberately told you to write to the viewer kind of what season 2 is going to be. I mean, we know the big bad is Cadmus this year, but learning how to be Supergirl, season 2 was learning how to be Kara. So maybe we're going to get a bit more introspective as we go forward, and that's certainly welcome. I was going to say another thing about the Jimmy Kara romance being abandoned. I mean, you threw in a Seinfeld reference, and it's not as hard of a transition because, as people may remember, I think it was at the end of Seinfeld season 2, they thought they were getting canceled, so they got Jerry and Elaine together. And then at the beginning of season 3, they just completely ignored that ever happened and moved forward with them just as friends. But this almost reminds me of what happened between Oliver and Laurel over on Arrow, because they built up to them getting together. Then it didn't work out. And maybe Jimmy needs to take a page out of Oliver's book and start dating Kara's sister. That's pretty much what he did, because he started dating Sarah Lance again, like, immediately.
Yeah, I noticed that Alex doesn't really get a whole lot of play in the relationship category. I almost feel like she has a fatherly / slightly romantic thing going on with Hank Henshaw, but yeah, maybe Jimmy needs to give the sister a try. Who knows?
Yeah, she needs to slide in. You know, and honestly, I think that brings up another point too. The perennial thorn in their side, Maxwell Lord, who was nothing like the Maxwell Lord in the comic books, I might add. He was, going to be the love interest for Alex, and I actually kind of liked them together. I thought they had really good chemistry. What's going on with him? Is he going to be back? Because now that Lena's there, Lena Luthor's there, is he just kind of like been forgotten about? What's going on with him? Did anybody know?
I wouldn't doubt if he comes back for a guest shot, because we really only know what's going on up through like maybe the mid-season finale. But going forward, there are no plans for him as a big bad or anything, because very technically Peter Fasinelli wasn't even a series regular for season 1. He would always get a credit special guest star or something like that. But yeah, I think they've gone through the Maxwell Lord thing, and in a way, I don't think they handled it totally well, because I think, to use a pro wrestling term, I think he did a bit too much of a hard babyface turn toward the end of the season. And yes, I know his intention was always, I'm suspicious of aliens for the greater good of Earth, but Maxwell Lord did do some very bad, questionable things, and I think they accepted him a little too easily at the end of season 1. And Peter Fasinelli, he did a good job, but they did not write or portray that character as Maxwell Lord. He was Lex Luthor by any other name. And what's kind of funny, if you shave Peter Fasinelli's head, he really would look a bit like Michael Rosenbaum's Lex Luthor.
Yeah, he was. He reminded me a lot of. He reminded me a lot of Lois and Clark's Lex Luthor. He came across as a very arrogant businessman, and obviously not as much of a sociopathic, diabolical evil, but he came across as a very Lex Luthor. It was a very thin Lex Luthor analog, for sure. Because it's definitely, there's definitely no question that they were like, me and Eric talked about this way back when season 1 first started, and it was like, how basically the season was very much a Superman analog, and it was, a lot of the things that had happened with Supergirl, they were ostensibly Superman retreads, and I do think that the idea of the show not only narratively finding its own footing, but the character of Supergirl finding her own footing rather than just being the female Superman, is something important. So if they go forward with, we've never seen Mon-El in live action. That's a very interesting thing to see. We've never got necessarily this version of Lena Luthor in live action. We've gotten a few versions of Lena Luthor.
Yeah, technically, we learned on Smallville that Tess Mercer's birth name was Lena Luthor. So, in essence, we have seen the character before, but yeah, this is, our first time seeing a full-on.
And speaking of hot actresses, the one that played Tess in Smallville, woo, smoking hot. She was hot.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, she was hot.
I had a Cassidy Freeman crush.
Who didn't, dude? Come on now. Kind of like Josh and his Allison Mack crush.
Oh man, don't even get me started on Allison Mack. I couldn't even talk to her at the Comic-Con. I was like fanboying.
Oh man, I would pay good money to see that, get that on camera. That would have been nice.
I was like tripping all over myself, and she kind of was like, "Oh, yeah, we're best friends," and it was like, it was really ridiculous.
Yeah. Anyone who listens to this show regularly, especially our DC TV episodes, knows how I love Rose McIver from iZombie.
Yeah, when Eric meets her, I'm gonna record that for everyone's enjoyment because it's gonna be ridiculous.
I wonder if it's gonna be anything like his Carla Harvey interview that he was recounting that last night. I was so nervous to get that phone call.
Yeah, he does a little bit of fanboying. But all right, we're back on track, boys. We could talk about pretty girls on sci-fi shows for the rest of eternity. The second season, though, I think we can all agree that it seems like it's gotten a little bit more on track in terms of finding its voice, finding its strengths, and moving forward. How do we like the new digs for the DEO? I thought it was a definite improvement over the Batcave DEO. What do you guys think?
I think it speaks. It's probably a product of the Vancouver move, and it also makes more sense. So they don't have to keep flying to the desert or whatever. One thing I was going to bring up that a benefit of having this with, we know Superman's already established, but it's the fact that they're meeting certain characters for the first time. We don't quite know everyone's Superman fought in a way. I mean, we know he's done battle with Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor is still in prison. So it'd be cool if we do get to see Lex at some point, because it's going to be. It's weird that we're hearing about Lex and Lois Lane off screen. So it's almost like we do want to see. Like, some of us are probably picturing we're still seeing Michael Rosenbaum in our heads, or maybe Erica Durant. So when we see a new physical representation, that's always good. But it gives the freedom to introduce characters for the first time. Like, we got Bizarro, basically a play on the Bizarro girl from the comics. So that was basically, in this universe, I think that was the first Bizarro period. So that lets them have freedom with that idea, and it allowed them. DC actually reprinted the Supergirl Bizarro Girl trade recently by Sterling Gates. Do some synergy with the TV show. That was no coincidence, and we saw for the first time both the Super Cousins met John Corbin Metallo. So that was his debut in this continuity. So there's room to play with classic Superman, Supergirl villains, and that's the nice thing. So before we wrap up our Supergirl portion of the show, I will give my rating, and then you two give your rating for these first two episodes and any closing thoughts you have. So I've pretty much felt I've said what I need to say about Supergirl for now, but my impression so far, I am giving the first two episodes an 8.5 out of 10. How about you guys?
Well, I'd say that I'd say a solid 8 at the very least. I will say that there are some things that you just can't escape with a television budget, which is it's something that Arrow gets away with, and even to an extent, the Flash. But when you see like large city wreckage in bright daylight of Metropolis, and you see people fighting gigantic, kryptonite powered robots in mech suits, it comes off as a little hokey. It does come off as a little cheesy. And again, I know that there's so much that they can do with the TV budget. So it gets a pass for some of those things. But in terms of the narrative and the feeling that we got from Superman, and even the effects that we got from Superman and Supergirl, the change with the DEO, casting the weird Jimmy Olsen relationship throwaway aside, I'd say I'd give it a solid 8. It's definitely gonna be enough to bring back my interest. And now that it's tied into the Arrow multiverse proper, it's going to be worth watching it to see when and if they make allusions and or references and crossovers to that. So what do you think, Ichiro?
I have to concur. I would give it a solid A as well. And when you were talking about the kind of the hokiness of some of the effects in the show, I think there's other CW shows that do it better. The whole makeup and the way they execute the whole Metallo thing, I thought was really bad. I wasn't necessarily a fan of that. As far as their costuming department, I would not be mad if they updated Superman's costume to get rid of those damn red straps that they have on there. But other than that, not bad. Not bad. Definitely solid 8, but nothing any higher.
So let's move on. I know that unfortunately Ken didn't get a chance to read some of these books, and I'm disappointed because I know the way that you consume comic books would make it possible. But you'll get a pass. We're going to talk about DC Rebirth month. Is it month 5? Yeah, I believe it's month 5. And there's only a couple books this month, and specifically, the only reason we're mentioning them is because one of them is going to have some rather larger implications for the DC universe proper, and the other one was just a really good single shot throwaway. One of them is the death of Hawkman. So this is is it a 5 or a 6 part arc, Eric?
It is a 6-part mini. One of the reasons we're going over a couple of these titles is that there are no more new ongoings coming out in 2016 for Rebirth. They've announced that in February we're going to be getting Justice League of America, Batwoman, and Super Sons. Still no word on Earth 2 yet, by the way. So were several miniseries that launched in October, but we wanted to go over some of the more impactful ones or ones that interested us. So the first one we're going to talk about is Death of Hawkman. And obviously that title grabs you, and that might be why DC went with it, because the original solicited title for the book was something like Hawkman, Adam Strange, Out of Time, something like that. But Adam Strange was a co-headliner, and he no longer has his name on the book, but he has pretty heavy involvement, because if you read the first issue of this book, I think it like starts in the present, and it looks like Hawkman's taken quite a beating, and then we go back to Adam Strange, and the first issue is mostly an Adam Strange issue, I'll give it that. But like a lot of books to come out in Rebirth, if you haven't read anything having to do with Adam Strange, you read this issue, you're going to know all the basics about him pretty much. Though it still hits the ground running. It's not like flashback heavy or anything. But definitely with it being called Death of Hawkman, we need to see a lot more of Hawkman in the second issue, which I think comes out next Wednesday, November. No, wait, not November. It comes out November 2nd, which is not next Wednesday. It's the following Wednesday. I don't know. My mind is. I had 3 hours of sleep, as I may have pointed out.
You were off by a week. We're gonna let you get a pass on that one.
So, but it makes me wonder why they're doing Death of Hawkman, because the whole thing with Rebirth is, getting to the essence of these characters, maybe reintroducing them to a mass audience that didn't read about them before. So why kill Hawkman out of the gate, unless the title's some kind of a tease? But it is pretty on the nose. But as we know, Hawkman is always a character who's reincarnated. I mean, they outright explored that on Legends of Tomorrow, but unless they get one from the future or something, because he is going to have to be reborn. But hey, Rebirth, they could do Hawkman Rebirth in the spring. You never know. But I hope they thought a bit ahead with this, because I mean, Hawkman is pretty much like a B-list villain, but admit he has a lot of fans. He's had ongoing series, so they can't just say, "Oh, we're killing off Hawkman," and then have no plan. I really hope they've mapped out where this is going, what this means for Hawkman, what it means for Adam Strange, what it means for the DC universe going forward. Because there's, three of us and some of you listeners may know, there's no love lost between Thanagar and Ron as planets. I mean, Ron is Adam Strange's home away from home. He's of Earth, but I wonder if any of the animosity between the planets is going to be played up in this. It's certainly an interesting series to watch. Mark and Draco's writing, Aaron Lopresti is illustrating it, and these are two guys whose stars have been on the rise in recent years in DC. So it's interesting to see them, get a crack at something that may be considered a bit more of a definitive work. So it looks like it is a series worth checking out. I would probably give the first issue like a good 7.58, and I will probably be following the rest of the issues. So I know Josh read it, so let's go to you first. What did you think of this debut issue? What do you think about this whole concept of Death of Hawkman? Do you think it's going to happen, or is it a bait and switch?
Yeah, I'm leaning towards bait and switch. I mean, it makes the most sense that they're going to have to do some type of. I mean, they've always done the whole death and rebirth thing in various iterations. And granted, we're not usually seeing the existing Hawkman die and then be reborn, but they could go more like Phoenix with it. Where he dies and comes back maybe with no memories, or he dies and comes back with limited powers, and it's a matter of time until he gets his powers back or something like that. I'm not quite sure what they're going to do with it, but I think that if they're going to just right at the beginning of Rebirth, I mean, Hawkman was not a strong title in the New 52. They were kind of trying to make him like a Wolverine-esque character. They're trying to show him as like a brutal savage, and but he's got a good sense of honor and a good sense of right and wrong, but he's got no problem killing bad guys and things like that. And I think that if we're just going to kill him off right at the beginning of Rebirth, which has been very successful for DC, I think they'd be doing themselves a disservice. But the first episode or the first issue was pretty decent. I mean, it wasn't a fantastic issue, but I've liked the Adam Strange character, which I kind of became a lot more familiar with during the I believe it was during the 52 run. Or the countdown run. I can't remember which weekly it was, where he was one of the characters, and it was him and Starfire who kind of developed, even though he was married, they kind of developed a somewhat close relationship because they were basically together in space for like a year with no other interaction except for a few people. But the character definitely was very interesting. He's essentially just a guy with a spacesuit who's, got some martial skills. He's very much like a pulp sci-fi hero of yesteryear, and he's also has kind of the, Earth savior. We've got a very John Mars or John Carter of Mars feel to the character as well, which is probably a strong influence on Adam Strange. But yeah, like Eric said, the primer for the character is kind of, you don't need to know anything about him. When you jump into the book, it's kind of like, hey, this is who I am. I'm an archaeologist on Earth, and so on and so forth. And then I got teleported to Ran, and then I became a superhero, and that's where I really live my life. And when I'm back on Earth, I really don't know what to do with myself. And it's kind of an interesting dichotomy. But yeah, I think that if they don't put a heavy emphasis on, and they could do the back and forth, like that for the first couple issues, but if they don't do a heavy emphasis on the second issue on Hawkman, they're going to be doing themselves. People are going to be like, well, what? I don't understand. This is the death of Hawkman. Can we get some Hawkman in it? I mean, if you're gonna send him off with a bang, at least let us get a last good amount of Hawkman before we kill him off. But yeah, I think what you're saying is actually a pretty solid idea for DC to explore, is introduce him as a Rebirth title. If they do kill him off, reintroduce him in a few months. And it's a smart way to play that game.
All right, and I know, Kenshiro, I believe you didn't have a chance to read Death Hawkman yet, but let us at least know your take on this whole event. And do you think possibly killing Hawkman's the right move, even if they decide to do a rebirth of sorts with him? And what do you think this means for the DC universe, not just these characters?
Well, this is not, this is what the Hawkman legacy has been. It's of course it's extended to Hawkgirl too, where they kill him, they bring him back, he's reincarnated, stuff like that. This is honestly a good move because, and the reason why is because with all the rebirth titles, I think they've done an absolutely fantastic job in bridging the gap between those fans that like the new 52 and the ones that were more like me, favored the pre-Flashpoint storyline of DC. And they've kind of merged a lot of that together, and they can do the same with Hawkman, who's never really, reached that upper echelon of popularity, even though he's kind of like been one of those characters that I think a lot of people like wanted to get into. But I think because he's been so tied with mythology, it's hard to get into. If they put the right writer who can update the mythos and make it more digestible for more casual fans that don't know a lot about Hawkman, I think this would be a prime opportunity for DC to develop another, money-making character. Because one of the things I think a lot of people were really excited about, going briefly back to TV, was the introduction of the Hawks to Legends of Tomorrow, and even having a Hawkgirl be on the Flash a little bit as Cisco Ramon's love interest. But we found the execution lacking in Legends of Tomorrow. In fact, on my show, Culture Junkies Live, I've advocated and said that I'm incredibly glad that the Hawks are off the ship because I felt like they were dragging the story down. Because, Hawkman, of course, was killed within, 2 episodes or something like that, and he was pretty much going off the canvas the entire season until like the last 5 episodes. It was a complete waste of the character. So I think they can definitely do a lot better by Hawkman, and I think this event can do wonders for the character. And as far as the DC universe moving forward, I don't think Hawkman has ever really had that much of a big impact on the DC universe outside of the Rand Thanagar War and stuff like that. But he's always been kind of more self-contained. I don't remember him really factoring very heavily into moving the overarching story of the universe forward in the DC universe. So I'd be willing to pick it up definitely once they relaunch him after they kill him off and bring him back for a couple of months. Although I don't think it'll be just a couple of months. They might put him on the shelf till next year. So we'll see.
Yeah, Ken brings up a good point. He's never really been a gigantic character in the DC universe. He's always been at the very least a B tier or maybe even a C tier hero. I'd say B tier. Most people know who Hawkman is. If you mention his name on the street, someone has some idea of him. But if you're like, yeah, the Red Tornado, I mean, people have no idea who you're speaking of. Or the Blue Beetle. Yeah, I think Hawkman, they maybe need to give him a push, and maybe that's what their intention with this. I mean, what you got to ask yourself whenever you have a huge crossover that seems to come out of nowhere, it's like, well, what's the intention here? Are they planning on giving this character a push? It's kind of like when an obscure wrestler comes out of nowhere and then all of a sudden starts getting a lot of mic work. You're like, okay, obviously they're deciding to bring this character back. They've got a story arc for him. And when you start making him seeing him do some impressive moves, you kind of get an idea that they're giving that guy a push to try and bring him back to notoriety. I think that could be what we're seeing with Hawkman. But let's move on to Dead Man. So the full title was Dead Man. Was it Lovin' the Mansion of
Dead Man, Dark Mansion of Forbidden Love?
Yes, Dark Mansion of Forbidden Love. A very, very pulpy title. Eric, I'll let you start off. What'd you think of Dead Man?
I'm not really a Dead Man expert. I think you said you were a bit more of a fan of the character, but this is a 3-issue mini, and It's got a little bit of a higher page count. I think it runs for like $5, $6, $7 a pop. But if you like Dead Man, or you just like gothic romance stories, haunted house stories, it's very good. I really liked the first issue, and it's bound as opposed to stapled, so I filed it with my trades and graphic novels as opposed to comic books. So if I get the second and third issues, and they're bound, and I don't see why they wouldn't be, it'll be filed right next to the first issue. I can't remember the creative team on it right now, but it's well written. They do a good job of uh, shifting narration between Dead Man and this other woman, who can see beyond the veil, so to speak. She's got some psychic abilities, it seems. Um, Giving them different perspectives, and that's kind of needed, especially since Dead Man is a character who can possess people. And then there's other X factors in it, like someone that Dead Man can't possess. Are they related to whatever's going on in this house? Dead Man is now bound to the house. He can't leave. And it really sucks you into the atmosphere of the book, because the art is so great, especially the settings. Even some of the best comic book artists, some panels, they'll tend to just have a white background. And I don't think that happened even once in this book. It's pretty consistent, and it's just a fully realized, gigantic mansion. To quote Wesker in the original Resident Evil game, "Wow, what a mansion!" Yeah, he kind of did say it that cheesily, but it almost makes me wonder if, when artists work on a book in a static setting like this, if they create even like a 3D model on the computer, or they have very detailed conceptuals room by room, because it is very uh it's very realized. And like I said, you do feel like you're almost in the mansion with these characters. And the fact that it's Dead Man means it's probably not going to be selling books by any stretch. But if you're a fan of the character, and it's only a 3-month commitment, it's very worth giving a go. Not entirely what you may expect from a superhero story, but it fits with Dead Man, and it's like putting the whole gothic romance thing in it is a unique way of approaching it, at least for this character. I don't know how. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen going forward, and sometimes that's an exciting prospect with the series. You don't know how it's going to read as a trade or anything, but it didn't feel like a primer for the Dead Man character. It's almost like you know him or you don't know him. Enjoy the story at face value, but it didn't feel exclusionary at all. It is friendly to new readers if you just want to pick it up and enjoy a good comic book. But again, this is another thing I would give a solid 8 to. It could go either way, but I don't see this creative team bungling it at all. Josh, what did you think, as being someone who's a bit more familiar with the character? And I know you've studied literature, so do you think this was really the right fit for Dead Man and such?
Yeah, it's an interesting take, and it feels a lot more like an indie book. It feels like something that we would read as a Vertigo title. And I know that speaking of indie titles, I know like Neil Gaiman's had his hands on Dead Man as far as writing that character before, and it's not surprising. He opens himself up to the more, I guess you could say, odd or unusual stories. Yeah, he's not a superhero in the same way that obviously a Superman or a Batman or anyone else is. This is a character who has a very unique place in the DC pantheon, kind of like the Spectre. This isn't a character who people are like, oh, the Spectre's my favorite character. Like, the Spectre's a very interesting character, and you know, in the DC universe, he's kind of an elemental force. But in terms of Deadman, you know, very few people who are saying, oh yeah, Deadman's one of my favorite characters. I think Deadman is one of the more interesting characters, and we've seen him. You know, it's kind of like it kind of. This is a little bit of a non sequitur, but you know, Doctor Strange. We've been talking about the new Doctor Strange trailer that had dropped. I know a couple of the guys from the Culture Junkies went into the like little 15-minute preview and were raving about it. When I first saw the trailer, I said this could literally be the most interesting Marvel movie that they make. And the reason I said that is not because I don't love Captain America, or not because I don't, but because it's such a unique thing. I think Deadman affords itself to some of the more unique and bizarre stories that you can tell. The fact that it's the dark mansion of forbidden love, right? You know, so it's obviously kind of touching on the literally, excuse me, as I stumble over my words. It's touching on the literary tradition of the Gothic romance, and you know, it's a long established. It's a long-established literary trope. You know, it's kind of going with the reason it's forbidden love is, you know, obviously there's it's something that's not to be obtained, and the fact that he's dead obviously is a significant thing. But the art, the storytelling, I thought that they were extraordinarily well done. I don't know where it's going to go from here, though. Like Eric said, and that's kind of part of the interesting thing about reading any comic book, where you're kind of not quite sure where it's going to go next. I know that that's not something that you get with Batman and Superman. You usually get a good feeling very shortly on, because they establish a character, they establish an arc, and you have an idea of where it's moving. This feels a little bit more like I'd say some of, you know, Grant Morrison's work on Batman, where it has a really ethereal quality to it. And I think that that's by design. It's got a more ambiguous feeling to it. Something that goes along with the idea of, you know, Boston Brand. You know, no one really knows where the Deadman's going next. What's going to happen? I mean, this is a guy who can technically is supposed to be able to inhabit the spirits, or, you know, inhabit the bodies of any sentient being, and the fact that he can't do it with this one character is an interesting take, because he's been able to do it to, I believe, Superman. I believe he's been able to inhibit Batman, and I think he's even done Wonder Woman. He's done some higher tier powered people in large crossovers, so that's an interesting take. But it's a really well-made book. If you like indie books, if you like Vertigo titles, if you like things that are not really the normal, if you like stories, especially comic book stories that are off the beaten path, I think that you would enjoy this one. And it was like, I want to say it was only $3.99 for a really big title, or really a large page count, that is. So it's definitely worth your money. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck. But yeah, I'll definitely pick up the other titles. It's a gorgeous book, if nothing else. But I think it's really well done as well. But Eric, that is my thoughts on Deadman. We're cut over the hour, so I think it's time to wrap things up. Any final thoughts on Supergirl, Hawkman, Deadman, anything like that?
I was just going to. You know, we usually do our power rankings about now, and we don't have much time, so I'm just going to fly through it quickly, and then I'll let Josh do his, and then I don't believe Kenshiro's. We'll get to him third, because I don't believe he's quite as caught up, but we'll at least have him say which Rebirth titles sound most interesting to him right now and what he wants to check out. But I will say that my rankings, which were pretty much not much different from each other for the first 4 months, are going to shift a little now. I might knock Green Arrow out of the top spot, because still a fantastic book, but the last issue or two weren't necessarily, I think, the best thing DC was publishing at the moment. But I mean, Benjamin Percy's still making gold with that book, and I'm looking forward to, continuing to read it. Just like The Flash is still one of their best titles, but the finale for the Godspeed arc wasn't totally as strong as I was hoping, but I'm looking forward to the next issue because they're doing Kid Flash of Two Worlds, and we get to see the two Wally Wests meet each other, so that will be interesting. But I think right now Action Comics takes my top spot because while it did stumble a little bit for a few issues because they really dragged that Doomsday fight on for way too long, we've all known it has some of the most intriguing mysteries and plot lines in Rebirth as a whole, and it's really circled back to that. It looks like they're going to be doing, a few short arcs here and there, and then they're stretching on with a Men of Steel arc between, the pre-Flashpoint Superman and this Lex Luthor. So it's going to be interesting to see how they interact and, if they have to help each other out and whatnot. But yeah, Action Comics, I think right now is the title I look forward to reading each month. Look forward to most, I should say. Just solid effort from Dan Jurgens, a guy who knows how to write Superman in and out. He's got some good rotating artists over there, and I don't see that book losing intrigue anytime soon. Detective Comics, of course, still going strong. Batman, the title itself, Batman, is listeners of the show know I haven't been too hot on in the Rebirth era, but the start of the I Am Suicide arc shows much promise. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that goes. Harley Quinn is still an awesome book. Justice League stepped up its game a little bit because I wasn't really enjoying that title much. But the last two issues are pretty cool. Green Lantern is still awesome. So a lot of good titles out there, but I know I'm having a hard time doing a top three, but for now I'm going to say Action Comics, easily my number one right now. So Josh, what's going on? What are you reading? What are
Yeah, the similarities are actually going to be a little bit redundant. So yeah, Action Comics is one of the best titles, and it makes me happier than just about anything because I love Superman. I'm glad that he feels. I feel like he's finally getting his due in DC Comics. Obviously, everyone puts concentration on Batman, and Batman's great. I've actually haven't been nearly as negative towards Batman, the title Batman, although I do think that Detective Comics has been a little bit of a stronger book. But I think Batman's been good. I think Detective's been good. Action and Superman, I think, have been really decent, but Action's definitely been the best. I have liked Green Arrow. I'm actually, I can't really rate Wonder Woman quite yet. I'm a few issues behind, but it's an interesting thing that they're doing. It's maybe one of the more interesting things that they've been doing in an ongoing recently, where every other title or every other issue is present, and then the other one is backstory. That's a very unique way to tell an ongoing story with Wonder Woman, and you don't have to take away from your page count in a current book by doing flashbacks. No, you just dedicate an entire issue to it. It's a very unique thing. I haven't really seen it done before, and it's effective. I'm not completely blown away, but it's a well-made book. It's a well-crafted book, and they're changing up some things with Wonder Woman, which is always good. But you named the rest of them. Green Arrow has been really well done. I've actually liked Aquaman as well. The Flash has been spectacular. I really like Green Lanterns. It's surprised me, but Hal Jordan and the Green Lanterns, that's one that's not getting a lot of play, and I've thought that it's been a pretty good title as well, and he's my preferred Green Lantern, as he is most persons' preferred Green Lanterns. So, Ken, what have you read, and what's at the very least, if you haven't been reading a ton of DC titles with the Rebirth, what's been the most impressive thing that you have read? And we apologize for kind of shutting you down on some of the comic book talk, because we know you hadn't been caught up.
Well, in fairness to you guys, I am not as well versed or up on the rebirth stuff, and that's probably that's mostly my own fault because I don't want to say it's a fault. It's just I haven't really had a lot of time, but I've been very interested in a lot of the rebirth titles. Particularly, of course, being Superman fan, I'm looking forward to pre-Flashpoint Superman being back. The Wonder Woman titles I know was something even before Rebirth happened. I was paying attention to. I thought that run was very well done. But right now I'm just kind of playing catch up. Of course, I'm saddened to to find that the Excellent Injustice books are as far as for the first game are over. But Eric kind of brightened my day yesterday when he told me that there's a new series getting ready to come out that's leading up to the second game, which is due out next year. So I'm very much looking forward to picking that up as well. Over on the Marvel side, I'm very much looking forward to reading Riri Williams, the new Iron Man. Iron Woman. I don't even know how to be PC and say that.
Iron Girl,
Iron Girl, or Iron Woman. I mean, hey, you might get hated on by saying girl instead of woman or something.
I think the book is called. I think the book's called Invincible Iron Man, but her actual code name is Ironheart.
Is Ironheart? Yes, I know.
Well, my question is, why are you assuming her gender? I mean, that's.
Yeah, we don't want to attract that kind of attention.
That's right.
Yeah, we don't want to attract that kind of attention. But yeah, I'm looking forward to reading that. I'm also looking forward to reading, even though I know Marvel's getting kind of crazy with a lot of their spider styles. He's about to become as bad as Batman was at one point. But we got Spider-Man and his amazing family. I think where both his daughter and Mary Jane are both going to be doing some crime fighting with him in a Marvel title. So, I'm looking forward to reading that as well because, honestly, that was one of the things that made me stop reading Spider-Man at one point because I was so mad that they nullified the marriage between, Peter and Mary Jane. And I thought, just the way that they went about it, her cutting the deal with Mephisto and stuff like that to save Aunt May's life, I thought it was, pretty stupid. But I will admit that coming out of that some of the really best Spider-Man titles or stories came after One More Day. So begrudgingly, I have to admit that, their gambit worked a little bit. But I think they still could have, had a more natural end to the Peter Mary Jane relationship than making essentially a deal with the devil to get out of the marriage. But whatever. But thanks for having me on the show, guys. I really appreciate it. And to everybody out there, hope you'll come by and check out Culture Junkies Live when we go live on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. every week. And we'll have a lot of really good